And joining us now is Rudik, member of the Ukrainian parliament. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Hello, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here on the show.
Delighted to have you. So, a lot of good news, right? But is this sufficient? I mean, we had the 61 billion, right, from the US. Now we have 3 billion from the UK, and of course, more freedom to sort of use long-range weapons. But isn't it all a little bit too late? Because there was this stalemate for such a long time.
Well, of course, we in Ukraine are absolutely elated of the news, both from the United States and the United Kingdom and other countries that are supplying aid for Ukraine. However, the first question is the time. And unfortunately, the US aid is coming with 7 months delay. And so we will have to catch up this time, and we also have to work hard on the logistics to make sure that the delay between the promise or the vote in the Congress and the exact time when Ukrainian soldiers will be able to use those weapons is as short as possible. The second question is, of course, the amount. And every time we are talking about fantastic decisions by our partners, really generous, we need to remember that Russia is spending more than 100 billion a year just on the war in Ukraine. And they do not care about the money, they do not care about the people, and they can use them as a battlefield meat. On the contrary, we in Ukraine cannot allow ourselves to do that because we are a democracy. So we have to be not only stronger, better equipped, we have to be smarter, and we have to use high-end technologies. We also need to ensure that Russia is unable to use those high-end technologies. And this is why it's very important that all our partners take the sanctions seriously, that Russia would be unable not only to purchase the details, but also have access to the technology. And as of right now, we see that this is not happening because with the recent attacks on Ukrainian cities like Odessa, there were yet again some of the Western particles found on the missiles that are constantly attacking us. So we need to be looking at winning the war in a holistic perspective. So attacking this issue with all the capacities and from all the angles. Sanctions, confiscating of Russian assets, weapons, financial aid, political sanctions against Russian authorities, so they would not be able to spend money abroad.
And speaking of a holistic perspective, you've mentioned Russian spending on the war. They are also spending lots of money on disinformation. Do you think that this is actually one front that is still very much underestimated in the West? I mean, one sign of how Russian disinformation has regrettably been successful is the so-called escalation narrative. Don't do this or Russia will escalate. Don't do that. Russia is going to escalate.
Right,
I mean, we've been hearing that all the time.
Right, but what about the delay in US Congress, right?
Precisely.
Some Republicans, right, being against spending money on Ukraine.
Some Republicans even repeating Russian narratives, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. So
right.
My question is this: will the West finally wake up to the reality that Ukraine should not be fighting this war with one hand tied behind its back? It should be able to strike against Russian targets because Russia does not have limitations like that. I mean, not only do they strike against targets in Ukraine, they strike against civilian targets and they commit war crimes. So it's just mind-boggling that we're still having the debate on escalation in the West 2 years into the war.
Right, so what could be done diplomatically? We know that President Zelensky has been on a diplomatic offensive, but also what could be done through these other means, right? I mean, you've mentioned technology, perhaps the internet. What is Ukraine planning to do, and what does it need help with?
So I absolutely agree with you that there are two directions, two fronts that are being completely underestimated. The first is the informational front, where Russia is using their propaganda narrative and pouring billions of dollars into supporting those narratives, not only in European countries and the United States, but at the countries that we call the Global South. So in African countries, in India, Brazil, we totally fully understand that they are providing these narratives and supporting them really strongly, making many people believe that black is white and vice versa. The second direction that I want to point out is the cyber defense and cybersecurity. And it is not a week in Ukraine when we do not hear about the attack of Russian hackers on some of our infrastructure objects or banks or objects of the civil infrastructure or some governmental facilities. And it is being constant. You cannot see it, but you can definitely feel it. And we are sure that the closer we are to the elections in European Union and the elections in the United States, these attacks will become more severe and more aggressive. So right now, we cannot do anything else just by tell the truth and get as many people as possible and as many politicians as possible here to Ukraine to see with their own eyes what is happening, to witness the results of Russian attacks, to talk to the people who suffered and who were victims of the war crimes. And just to say that the war is not over and we need to be united and concentrated on winning the war as much as possible. So our call is for the whole democratic world to wake up and to realize that the war is not over and that Russia would not be stopped, would not stop unless they are stopped. And while we are here to stop it with all our intentions and energy and capabilities, we just need a fairly minor thing. We need the means to do that. So we really hope that this message is getting the track and is delivered to everyone who can hear it, because the situation is really critical right now.
And do you think that the West is prepared to handle that? Because Russia may also be thinking, like, it wants to isolate Ukraine diplomatically. It's not going to make Ukraine's supporters turn away, but it could try and hijack elections, use election meddling. We already have a few countries in the European Union which are behaving, well, somewhat unusually. They are basically denying all the sense in helping Ukraine instead of actually trying to block it. Hungary, Slovakia also. Do you think that Western democracies are being exploited in this way by Russia because it knows that they cannot simply ban parties which are perhaps not openly pro-Russian, but they have these tendencies? And if they win the elections, well, the situation is becoming more and more difficult because nothing can be done. It's still a democratic process, albeit one that was influenced from the outside by Russia.
The authoritarian regimes are trying to play on the all democratic basis to win with their narratives. They are playing against the freedom of speech by pushing their propaganda and saying, well, we are just another opinion that you don't want to hear. Why you are not letting our propagandist channels into your media matrix? Or they are trying to, of course, abuse the democracy by supporting and paying to pro-Russian parties and hoping that they will get in power. They are meddling with the elections, and there were confirmations of how they influenced the elections in the United States. So whatever freedom is there, by the way, the freedom of the religion, and then Russian churches are very active in Moldova and in Georgia, being basically again influenced by Russia and pushing pro-Russian narratives. So we need to be very careful about preserving the democracy inside the country, but being very strict and very vocal outside, not allowing the things that we believe in to be used against us. And it's a tricky question, and it's a very complicated matter because you don't know at which point you are starting to cut your own citizens' freedoms. But it is very important that everybody understands that this is what is going on, and everybody understands that we are fighting against one enemy who doesn't care about the democracy and doesn't care about any of the rights.
Absolutely. Kira, Rudik, excellent as usual. Thank you so much for being with us.